Hello, everybody. It's your Chapo again coming at you. It's me, Matt, and Felix joining you for this episode. And this is going to be like just a bad news, depressing one because I guess like just right off the bat, we got to talk about what's going on in Minneapolis and St. Paul right now. This is, about 2 nights now of basically an uprising against the police department in Minneapolis in response to their killing of George Floyd, which we all saw on video. And I got to say, that video, even in like a culture now where we've become completely numbed to these like wanton acts of murder and sadism done on completely helpless people by the police, this one really set a new standard for how fucking vicious and awful it was. Just like kneeling on a guy's neck for 5 minutes until his voice box gets crushed and then he dies on the street. And the response to this has been, I would say entirely appropriate given the fact that this keeps happening. And just a quick bit of background here. The officer who actually killed George Floyd is a guy named Derek Chauvin, who, it's come out now, has killed multiple people in uniform while working for the police department. He was involved in, he was put on leave after an inappropriate police shooting of Leroy Martinez. He shot Ira Latrell Tolles, an unarmed black man who was 21 years old in 2008. He was one of the shooters involved in the killing of Wayne Reyes. He was a guy who shot 16 times. A total of 42 rounds were fired at him. In 2005, he had a police brutality charge. And it just like has a record of killing and brutalizing people in the line of duty. And like now he's lost his job for this, but we're waiting for them and the 4 officers to be charged with a crime. So I mean, I don't know where do you begin with this one? I mean, like Felix, I want to go to you because I feel like you have more of a close personal connection with the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul and Minnesota. So what can you say about this?
I mean, the MPD is. It almost feels silly to say these things, but like even by American standards, and especially like brutal and racist police department, Chauvin shot, I believe it was in 2006. He shot and killed a Native American man, and
I just
let
referenced
off by then Hennepin County District Attorney Amy Klobuchar.
Yeah,
which is so. I thought the response to this one by not just people like Amy Klobuchar, but even conservatives has been interesting because it's not that they're going to do anything, but the video itself, as you mentioned, is so fucking unquestionably bad that what can you even say? The only guy I've seen actually defend the cop, even in the conservative sphere, is Gorka. That's literally the only guy.
What did Gorka say about it?
He was like, do people know the backstory here? And it's like,
the guy was arrested.
Go back to your fucking shit. Go back to your shithole. Honestly, like fuck off. Yeah. Please go back to your shithole.
The guy, he was under arrest for writing a bad check for like allegedly for $20.
Yeah, maybe you could execute somebody for that in Hungary, among with other crimes like witchcraft. But
or being Jewish.
Go back there. But no, I mean, I do think though that's mostly what people are going to get from the powers that be is. Things like Minneapolis Mayor Jacobs' phrase very limp dick notes app take on this, which is like, it is fucking pathetic. Like, I mean, really, what can you say? But that this is the appropriate reaction. I don't know. Did you see that video of the guy in the full like gear, like the umbrella, gas mask, all that shit? Wordlessly going into the auto zone and breaking
very
the hammer and walking
shady
out. That was fucking weird.
It's weird, yeah. I'm sure there are agent provocateurs in these, in the midst of these crowds and in the midst of this this uprising. But like even if that's not the case, like again we have another round of like, oh, is looting okay, or like, oh, I agree with the protest, but like once you do violence, you do harm to your cause or whatever. Well, it's just like. We've seen like what protest does, and it's just like they'll absorb it and it'll go away, and like the same shit will happen over and over again. And it's just like I think this has to be understood as like a spontaneous uprising against the conditions of the police state in America.
I have a new understanding of the anti-looting thing, and I think it's that I saw this some anime guy today post oh well, white people didn't do this after. Remember that cop just fucking gunned down that guy like a dog, the white guy in Dallas.
We talked about it
in a hallway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a hall in a hallway. Yeah, and there was video of that too.
And he was like, "Oh well, white people didn't do anything after this." And it's like, I realize the anti-looting thing. Part of it is just pure flat racism. That's most of it. But another thing is just being mad at black people for actually having self-respect, something barely anyone else in America seems to fucking have.
Yeah.
It's how would you not see that as an indictment on people that they didn't fucking riot after that fat pussy just gunned down that father in a hallway?
No, I saw that, and you're totally right. In terms of a lot of the anger and smugness and condescension, or even if you want to just call it a riot, or describe this in terms of a spastic, undirected outburst of violence and frustration that's unproductive, right? And I'm certainly not describing it in those terms. But even if you wanted to, it's how much can you put up with as an individual, as a community, just as a citizen of this country? What can they do to you? How much can they do to you before you do anything in response, or you break the law, do something in response to stand up for yourself in any way? And yeah, like you said, it's about dignity and self-respect. At some point, if you're willing to put up with this over and over again, it's you lose self-respect. It's demoralizing. And I'm not saying this is like this stupid easy thing where everyone's oh, we should all be out, it's time to mask up and smash the state or whatever. It's I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm not condemning. They burned down a Target or an AutoZone, or they looted shit from it. It's first of all, you're talking about neighborhoods and communities that have been looted entirely already legally. So and then it's their communities. Well, they don't own any of these things in these communities. So why I actually have a quote here from James Baldwin that I think sums this up very nicely. And this was an interview he did with, I think, Esquire in 1968. Of course, in the shadow of the King assassination and American cities being roiled by similar uprisings. And Esquire asked him, how would you define somebody who smashes in the window of a television store and takes what he wants? And Baldwin's response is, before I get to that, how would you define someone who puts a cat where he is and takes all the money out of the ghetto where he makes it? Who is looting whom? Grabbing off the TV set? He doesn't really want the TV set. He's saying, screw you. It's just judgment, by the way, on the value of the TV set. He doesn't want it. He just wants to let you know he's there. The question I'm trying to raise is a very serious question. The mass media, television, and all the major news agencies endlessly use that word looter. On the television, you always see black hands reaching in, And the American public concludes that these savages are trying to steal everything from us, and no one has seriously tried to get where the trouble is. After all, you're accusing a captive population who has been robbed of everything of looting. I think it's obscene. And that was in 1968. I think it is exactly as true today.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I don't know what else there is to say.
Well, I mean, the fact that it's as true as it was said in 1968, it doesn't say a lot of. It doesn't. Honestly, it doesn't leave me very hopeful that any amount of protest will have an effect, absent anything else, absent some larger effort, because we have the results of waiting for things to boil over when they're no longer tolerable, and it's not terribly encouraging.
And the other thing that's been going on is that since 1968 and over the last 40 years broadly of American history, crime across every category of violent crime in all parts of the country, everywhere, has gone steadily down, down, down. But police departments' budgets have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and police shootings have gotten worse and worse and worse. So obviously, it's not about crime or keeping anyone safe. It's just the majority, I feel of L.A., New York, the amount of money that they spend on their police departments, and the new budgets that they're trying to pass now under COVID quarantine, where they're slashing everything else, they're doubling down on giving all these money to the police departments. And it's just at what point would we be do we really need these people? I mean, even if you don't want to get rid of police departments entirely, could you maybe cut their budgets or something?
Yeah, I mean, what other reason would there be for them to have fucking assault vehicles and all this shit unless they were supposed to be at war with the communities they're supposed to be protecting?
Yeah, I know.
There's no fucking reason for this.
I feel like
there's no fucking reason for this unless you had complete fucking contempt for everyone that lives in the neighborhood, which, they do.
I think a large chunk of police departments' budgets have gone into buying plus-size tactical gear for the warriors.
I saw a video of a guy on the roof of one of the precincts in Minneapolis today, who just a big boy, just a big beefy boy, essentially sitting in a lawn chair shooting beanbags at people. Minimal effort.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's like how you should kind of be mad at everyone for not rush. Like for anyone who isn't out, you should kind of be mad at for not rushing that guy. Like, it's like that's like the thing where it's like, oh yeah, well you don't see white people doing it. It's like, yeah, if you don't see that and don't want to fucking beat the shit out of that guy, I don't know what to tell you. They could that same cop could just come to your house and put on a fucking Punisher print condom and fuck your wife, and you'd thank him. After that, anyone who is, yeah.
Because a lot of white people have the implicit, often unspoken understanding that in the racial conflict, in the buried racial antagonism of this country, that the cops are on their side. And so even if one of them gets killed in a bad shoot like the guy in Arizona, there's not a sense of it being a aggrievement to a white person as a white person. It's abstracted away from a specific threat to them because they don't see the police as antagonistic toward them in general. And the thing is that what people are going to find out more and more is that while that is true, it is only true to an extent. It's true to the extent that our comfort allows it. When walls start going up and fences start going up and white people start realizing, oh, my Blue Lives Matter bumper sticker isn't going to stop the sheriff from evicting me from my house. They're going to realize, oh, their relationship to me, it was entirely contingent on me being a productive citizen, and if things change and enough people aren't like that anymore, it's going to be a rude awakening.
And I guess when I think like overall about this, like when this happens and there's a reaction to it by the people who are the target of this kind of violence, and they see another human being just so wantonly killed like that over like $20, and then they looted a Target, they burned down the AutoZone or whatever. I think like again, like of course the police violence in reaction to this is also insanely disproportionate to like any threat posed by these people. Like the gallons of tear gas and rubber bullets being fired right now is probably like unthinkable to speculate about. But like the other thing is like, taken overall, the idea that like this keeps fucking happening, and like almost always now it's caught on video so everyone can see it, and it's like unmistakable what happens. Like when a guy who's handcuffed on his stomach on the pavement gets shot in the back by the cop arresting him and killed. Like, it's unambiguous what's going on there. And you see this shit, and it's like, isn't the question like why isn't like the violence in reaction to this worse or like more widespread? It would seem to be like, again, like disproportionate to the level of violence directed at these communities or at everyone all the time by the fucking cops and the people who support them. And I guess like the other thing is like, this is the easy, like hypocritical point to make, but it really is stunning in light of like the weeks leading up to this, where it's just like all of the people who will like, I will die to defend Target, like, and it's just like, hey, look, if you didn't want to have a cop break your neck, you shouldn't have resisted arrest and you shouldn't have broken the law in the first place. Like the reactions of these same people like a week ago, when they're not even told by the cops, just by like a store, could you please wear a mask and not cough on everyone while you're shopping for groceries? They're like, nope, not going to do it. I'm standing up for myself and my rights. It's just like the weird way which these people ping pong back and forth between like absolute craven obsequiousness to like law enforcement and the state, and then like flouting or just like pretending that like everyone who's wearing a mask in public is like a sheeple and brainwashed and programmed, and like you do what the government tells you, like that's because you're weak or whatever. It's just, I mean, it's like the hypocrisy is just so obvious, but like just so stifling in this case when to think about it, because it's just
it's not really hypocrisy though. I don't think that that's hypocrisy. They think that the purpose of the state is to provide them with rights and comfort and to constrain the lives of people who don't deserve the same level of rights that they have. And so in their mind, there is no contradiction. And when you observe the way that the police operate, it's hard to argue that in terms of observing reality, they're wrong.
The other thing I've noticed recently, public responses from prominent politicians and certainly Democratic presidential candidates or whatever, Amy Klobuchar, of course. We know that, she didn't prosecute this guy when she had the fucking chance in another shooting from 2008. Again, he kept his job, went on to kill more people for that police department. She just says, my notes app, my statement on the officer-involved shooting. Officer-involved shooting is such an interesting phrase because it's been adapted by journalists almost unquestionably. And journalists didn't come up with that term to describe when the police kill someone. Police departments invented that term and gave it to journalists as a explicit term of propaganda to obfuscate the reality of what in any other circumstances would be like man kills man with gun. So it's like, okay, officer involved incident. Well, okay, how was the officer involved? It's just like this bizarre, like everything is in this passive voice. But what's interesting is that, going through the statements made by like prominent Democrats, it seems to was changed is like they'll all say things like, this is an example of systemic racism in our society that we need to fight, which I don't know, maybe they wouldn't have done 10 years ago. Like they say the structural racism or like, we need to stand up like for the Black lives. What none of them say is use the word police or murder. The police are obscured entirely and like they're able to talk about it using kind of state-of-the-art, technically correct, using the phrases that like reflect the attitude and philosophy of like Black Lives Matter and structural racism or whatever. But it's just like they're not wrong, but they're all none of them use the word murder or police in any of their statements. And like it's easy to say, oh, like systematic racism is bad, but they're leaving the cops untouched because like these are the people who are, I don't know, for the most at the spear tip of enforcing systematic racism and then doing the actual killings of Black people. And it's just like the cops are still largely unscathed by all this, or even if they're being called to be prosecuted or fired. And like these guys haven't even been charged yet. And I would imagine, given the level of attention that this has gotten, largely because of the uprising or insurrection against it, I would suspect they will be charged. But the thing is, it's like all a cop has to do is avoid saying on the stand, yeah, I killed him because I wanted to. All they have to say is that I felt my life was in danger, no matter how immobilized or vulnerable the person they did it to, who was handcuffed, was. That's all they need to say, is that I feared for my life, and it's justified. And at worst, they'll like lose their pension or job. That's it. But putting someone in jail for these police shootings is like, has shown to be over and over again, no matter how egregious it is, almost impossible.
And it's going to remain that way as long as that is their role in the social order is what it is. Well, I mean, they don't make sense if they don't have that ability. And more importantly, they have now the sense of themselves sort of almost as a class in itself to prevent that from happening. Because much like the military, they are much more trusted, the police, by a lot of people than any specific member of like the political class is. And we see how whenever there's a conflict between the police force in a given area and elected officials, who wins that because the people who with money in their pockets and people who vote most know who is more important to the maintenance of their quality of life as they want it, and it sure as hell isn't anybody they voted for. Somebody with a gun.
I saw clips of Sean Hannity talking about this last night, and he was breaking. It's one of the most ghastly things I think I've ever seen. He's breaking down this video, and he's using his expert as a martial arts student to break down what was going on. He's like,
there's a phrase of martial arts. It's called choking somebody out.
He's using his Krav Maga knowledge to like break down the tape of the tactics used, and it's like, motherfucker, the guy was in handcuffs. This isn't about combat. This is a guy with like a knee on someone's neck while they were fully immobilized on the fucking pavement. Fuck, guys, sorry. I know like this is a brutal one to try to like talk about or do an episode about, but again, because it's sort of like, what more can you say? Or like we've seen this thing happen again and again and again, and like Ferguson, like that was seemed like a big sea change, and then like people forget.
Wait a minute,
forget.
Hold on a minute. Did it?
I know.
I don't remember ever feeling like anything was changing with after Ferguson is the thing.
Well, I mean, it was like it became a part of the like the national consciousness. It was like a thing
but that's what happens.
Exactly.
So we just things happen, and then we just become aware of them, and then we have one more shred of awareness to weave into our blanket of awareness that we carry around us to keep us warm, but it doesn't change anything.
Yeah. The thing that we may not be aware about is that like at least a half dozen of like the prominent Ferguson activists shortly thereafter or in the subsequent years have been found shot in the head in an entirely burned car.
Yeah, it is weird.
Or been murdered and like and then unsolved homicides and like almost like textbook assassinations of like, well, gee, if I was knew the actual details of, let's say, how the police investigate a homicide, I would know to burn everything to obscure any DNA evidence that might link it to the killer. And it like I think it's like not insane to speculate that these are just straight up death squads, and like the triggermen are active duty members of these same police departments.
I mean, it's the most likely thing. Yeah, I mean, Occam's razor.
Yeah, and I mean, I would also imagine that it's like if they're assassinating them in the exact same manner and mutilating the body post-death in the exact same manner, it's almost like they kind of want you to know. Like a lot of things now, they want you to know and want you to go insane with the fact that you know.
Well, I mean, Matt, this is, you mentioned the soldier mentality, the Punisher logo, the ubiquitous use of the Punisher symbol among first soldiers and now cops in this country, and like, how chilling that is in their own self-iconography. That like I said, they have it on their vest. They put a sticker on the car. They're advertising it to you openly that they identify themselves with the character of the Punisher, a vigilante lunatic who murders people for like snatching a purse or whatever. And we've talked about this before, like the evolution of this, like the cops thinking of themselves as warriors rather than peace officers. And I'm not saying like police departments were ever particularly good in this country, but this is something I wanted to bring up that like I've known about for a while, and I never knew really what to make of it because of how disturbing it is. But I suppose now is a good time to bring this up. I read a while ago about this guy named Dave Grossman, who is a former Army Ranger who has now transitioned into a very lucrative career as a consultant to police departments. And basically he travels around the country like year round and just gives like to hundreds of different police departments all over the country, selling them a 6-hour seminar of what he describes as his bulletproof warrior course. And this guy is a pure psychopath. I'm going to include a small short film in the show description. This is like just a very quick short film the New Yorker put out on their YouTube channel that contains a lot of footage of him speaking at one of these conferences or these sort of like motivational self-help seminars to basically help cops be more comfortable with killing people and using their gun in the line of duty.
Once you've made the decision to take a human life, you're a transformed creature, you're a predator. What does the predator do? They kill. Only a killer can hunt a killer. Are you emotionally, spiritually, psychologically prepared to snuff out a human life in defense of innocent lives?
So, I mean, I'm including the video because I think it's instructive to actually hear this guy's voice and see like the expressions on his face and how kind of manic and generally unhinged he seems. But also just imagine a guy like that speaking to like a hotel conference room full of just like bald heads and Oakleys, just hot dog necked, crew cut fucking pigmen. And then what he's telling them is explicitly saying, I am taking everything I've learned training soldiers to be efficient killers and explicitly to program a human being to overcome their natural, almost like biological revulsion to consciously taking a human life and make you into, a killer, a weapon of death that you can draw, point, shoot, kill efficiently every time without hesitation. And then also, like, the hesitation is also morally wrong. And that even if it's a bad shooting, you were right. If your first instinct was to kill, you were in the right, most likely. So I'm just going to read a little bit here from Brian Schatz of Mother Jones followed this guy. Just did an article about it. So I just want to read a little of this. Marching around the stage in a theater in Lakeport, California, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman tells his audience that they shouldn't go out looking for people to kill because those who need killing, the gangbangers, terrorists, and mass murderers, will come to them. All they need to do is be ready. Are you prepared to kill somebody, he asked me, and the small group of armed citizens who have paid $90 or more to see him? If you cannot answer that question, you should not be carrying a gun. 2 hours into his high-octane 6-hour seminar, the self-described top police trainer in the nation is just getting warmed up. Grossman, a 60-year-old former Army Ranger, wears, going on here. He sports a military haircut. On stage are 2 giant easel pads, their legs taped to the floor so that they don't go crashing down whenever he hits them to punctuate his points. We fight violence. What do we fight it with? Superior violence, righteous violence. Over the past 2 decades, Grossman has achieved semi-celebrity status as an authority on aggression, close combat, and the psychology of killing. He literally wrote the book on killing called On Killing. His books have been translated into several languages, and he says that they are required reading at the FBI Academy and many law enforcement academies. He's lectured at West Point and claims to have conducted trainings for every federal law enforcement agency, every branch of the armed forces, and cops in all 50 states. For more than 19 years, he's been on the road leading seminars and trainings nearly 300 days a year. So, I mean, I take him at his word that he's the top police trainer consultant in the country, but let that sink in for a minute about what he's being paid, again, by police departments with tax money to teach cops and also armed private citizens, to inculcate in them the mindset of a Green Beret in a war zone. Be prepared morally and intellectually to kill without hesitation or remorse. And that, like, your job is to take a life, and even if you take the wrong life, you were in the right in doing so. Or you can't feel too guilty about it because you are an avatar of righteous violence that's there to protect the sheep from the wolves.
Obviously, cops are the biggest babies on earth, and they demand total obsequiousness and butt smooching at all times, and free coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, and all that shit. And if you'd ask them why, they'd say it's because we risk our lives, thin blue line, all that shit. But stuff like this shows that, and that approach to lethal force shows that no, they're not willing to die at all. They have not accepted the idea that their public service, their protection of people, would involve taking any risk to themselves. That's no. I'll wear phone book thick Kevlar and shoot anyone who looks at me. Even though doing that in the long run makes policing harder and undermines everything. This is a social solvent, and you're like, yeah, yes, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to destroy a city like they're doing in Minneapolis, to allow a city to be destroyed because of my crimes. But then I have to do that because I have to go home. Well, I'm sorry. If you're that much of a bitch, don't become a cop. And then people might respect you. People might respect police officers if they were actually taking a risk. If they were saying, I am helping my community and I'm good, I don't know, whatever.
I know what you mean. Like, it reminds me of that fucking worm, like Ben Shapiro's comments when Trayvon Martin was killed, or he was like, this is years after, he's like, happy 21st birthday to Trayvon Martin, who would have, been alive today had he not slammed the guy's head into the concrete. Where it's like, George Zimmerman killed him because he was losing a fight that he started. So, like, the fact that he got his head bounced off the fucking pavement by a teenager is entirely, he was the aggressor. He deserved to have that happen to him. And also, like, he wouldn't have died anyway. So, like, he fucking killed that kid because he lost a fight that he started. And it's just like, I'm sorry, like, if you can't settle with your fists, then you don't have, like, fuck off. Like, again, like, you want me to respect you, but you're going to kill someone as soon as it looks like you are in any danger of getting hit in the head. Fuck off. Like, it's so gross because it's like at every point, like Zimmerman or people like him, instigate a situation, which, by the way, they have no authority to approach someone on the street and like ask them what they're doing there or like detain them or whatever. He was just some fucking psycho on his own with a gun. They instigate a situation that like they are the aggressor. They are the ones doing violence. And then if someone defends themselves or fights back or beats the shit out of them, then they're like, oh, well, my life was in danger. So I just killed a teenager and I was right to do so because he was threatening my life. It's like, asshole, like you were threatening his fucking life. You had the gun. You saw him on the street. You were tailing him and approached him. Like if you had just let him be, like you wouldn't have been in any danger. And like, hey, also you fucking should have been in danger, fucking psycho. And it's the same mentality here. And I was going to go on with Grossman. Grossman's philosophy grew out of 2 decades, he says, spent training soldiers to kill more efficiently. The military has long taught its troops to kill through a process of conditioned response that's meant to override the part of the brain that asks, should I be doing this? By refining this approach, Grossman and others claim the U.S. military boosted its kill ratio, the percentage of frontline soldiers who actually shoot to kill, from between 15 and 25% during World War II to as much as 100% during the Vietnam War. Grossman takes this a step further. Rather than simply conditioning soldiers and police officers to shoot without hesitation, he teaches them to embrace their responsibility to kill. Killing's not the goal, he cautioned in a 2004 interview with Frontline, but we all understand that killing is the likely outcome. He calls this discipline killology, the study of the destructive act. Though he spent years as a soldier, he has never killed anyone in combat. Oh my God, wait, it took that long for me to figure that out? What a shock. What a shock that this guy has been like eating off of being like, I'm the steely-eyed, like Green Beret killing machine who does motivational seminars but has never actually experienced combat myself or fired a shot in anger. What a fucking shock that like it's guys like this that have such a cavalier attitude about being a warrior and taking another person's life with a gun. And while he is a luminary to many in law enforcement, the warrior mentality he espouses is under fire. As Black Lives Matter has exposed the prevalence of police abuses and the confrontational attitude that often sparks them, Grossman continues to insist that the cops are the ones under siege and that they must be more, not less, prepared to use force. The number of dead cops has exploded like nothing we've ever seen, he tells the armed citizens in Lakeport. This is not true. The annual number of police officers intentionally killed while on duty in the past decade is 40% lower than it was in the 1980s. If emergency medicine and body armor hadn't improved since the 1970s, Grossman claims, the number of dead cops would be 8 times what it is today. It's not clear how he arrived at these figures. Last summer, after a black man named Philando Castile was shot and killed during a traffic stop outside Minneapolis, it was revealed that the 2 years earlier, the officer, Geronimo Yanez, had attended the Bulletproof Warrior 2-day training seminar taught by Grossman and his colleague Jim Glennon. The booklet Grossman hands out at his civilian training contains some of the same content that cops receive. There are charts and tables on perceptual distortions in combat and combat efficiency. A section titled "Thou Shalt Not Kill?" lists Bible verses that distinguish between justified killing and murder. Grossman does not tell us that oftentimes in police training the right answer is not to shoot, but he quickly pivots back to his message that right behind the police, gun owners are frontline troops in his war. He also views the world as an almost unrecognizably dangerous place, a place where gang members seek to set records for killing cops, where a kid in every school is thinking about racking up a body count. His latest book, Assassination Generation, insists that violent video games are turning the nation's youth into mass murderers. He foresees attacks on school buses and daycare centers. Kindergartners run about 0.5 miles an hour and get a burst of about 20 yards, and then they're done. It won't just happen with guns, but with hammers, axes, hatchets, knives, and swords. His voice jumps an octave. Hacking and stabbing little kids. You don't think that they'll attack daycares? It's already happening in China. When you hear about a daycare massacre, he shouts, "Tell them Grossman said it was coming." I mean, you get the idea. He goes on to talk about how, like, literally everyone in America is going to join ISIS and, like, just lurking behind every door, every street corner is just like,
right. I mean, the one of the only ways you can get most people to accept all this is if they're fucking terrified all the time. If they're constantly fucking afraid.
And I know, like, we've talked many times before about how American society has in many ways never been shittier than it is today. But, looking at just the numbers, it's also like never been safer than it is today. in terms of like the likelihood of a violent crime happening to you. Much less, let alone something like a terrorist bombing or killing or something like that. Again, I wanted to share with you guys the wonderful and terrifying career of Dave Grossman, a guy who should absolutely be behind bars as long as we're going to still have cops in prisons. People like him are, like I said, just like try to imagine how many police departments he's given this lecture to and how much they probably liked hearing what he had to say.
It's funny that on that Grossman thing, that the fantasy among cops doesn't really seem to be a power fantasy, right? It seems to be one of acute fear and almost of weakness, right? And maybe that's where the intersection with like a fascist mentality is, right? That they are in constant danger, that their lives are always on the risk, that every single person they see is an enemy who's putting a target on their heads. And
like every single traffic stop, you got to just assume that the guy's going to kill you, like in a split second, right? I mean, I think it's a little bit more. I would say it's a little bit more complicated because obviously Felix is right. Like it's only through like a completely irrational and like insane, like fear-based view of the world that you can intellectually or emotionally justify this to yourself, or like why there would be like a reason that you'd have to think this way or behave this way. But on the other hand, I think it's like they want to believe that because once you do, it gives you the license to do the thing that to justify yourself doing the thing that you were already fantasizing about doing, which I don't think it is about power, lording power over other people, killing them, using a gun to be the good guy and to kill criminal scum or whatever.
Right. Well, it's a mirror image of our endless war thing. It's the same playbook was used for the Cold War, is used for the war on terror, is used for whatever we have now, which is like, oh, no, like in normal conditions, like a lot of people wouldn't really give a shit. They wouldn't be like, oh, we need to have a military base in Latvia. We need to go to war for fucking Kuwait. We need to contest the South China Sea for whatever fucking reason. But if you get them in the frame of mind where it's like, oh, well, then what if the communists take over the world? What if Al Qaeda has a base that they can operate out of? What if this? What if that? What if China controls all the shipping here? And the answer for a lot of those what ifs is, if we weren't there, your life on average probably not affected too much. The average person doesn't benefit all that much from endless war and the American empire. But you get people to like sort of co-sign it in the way that Americans do with this sort of thing, which is they like not thinking about it. It's enough of a push that you can cause them to not think about it at all. And then for another percent of the population, like probably a smaller percent, the idea of a world constantly that's a constant powder keg, ready to just pop off at any minute. There's conflict everywhere. Everyone wants to kill Americans just because they're Americans. That appeals to them because, they want to go overseas and, as part of their coming of age, just fucking gun down someone in Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever. Because, there's so many people when you have an empire, you have to have a thing that appeals to both types of people, maybe more. But, I mean, I think it's a similar thing with characterizing the domestic side in that way of being abound of threats or opportunities to become whole as a person by killing someone.
What you're saying is about how like it's the same mentality that we employed to fight the Cold War and now the war on terror, and now we're seeing like police departments, like the I don't know, the blending of these things is happening more and more openly, and like just right in front, like I said, like all this Punisher shit, all this tactical, like I said, plus size tactical gear that all these pigs are fucking love wearing now. It really reminds me of just what Matt and I, when we talked to Vincent Bevins earlier this week, where he said, if you want to do a coup and like a genocide, the way to do it is to tell everyone that the people you're going to kill are right on the verge of doing a coup to you. And like they do that every single time. It's like it's both an act of projection, but also it's like a very, very effective strategy for justifying it to like the broad mass of the public that like you said, Felix, just would prefer not to think about it or like isn't really committed one way or the other. But once it starts happening, if they, like if they're like, oh, well, they're doing it to the evil people who are going to torture and kill us, even though there were like absolutely no chance of that happening, no evidence whatsoever that that's the case. But like, yeah, like I said, this is just, it's textbook evil 101. And I think we see a lot of that same mentality in this warrior cop shit. And I guess like another thing I want to say is like, I know the Minneapolis mayor has like for a while talked about, oh, we need to get rid of this warrior cop mindset and have like more community policing or whatever. And it's just like, I don't know, like that seems sort of like an empty measure myself, like as well. Cause it's just like, oh, like I'll have like a nicer cop that will just sit on my neck for 5 minutes while I choke to death rather than one who's dressed like fucking Master Chief kicking in my door. It's just, I don't know. Like, it's hard to like, I know there's a lot of things like people seem like they want to hear, but like just overall, God, like, I'm sorry, like this shit is going to keep, like, it doesn't matter like who or what the cops are, or, like how they dress or whatever. It's just, they're still fucking cops, and their relationship to you, and especially to the poor communities that, bear the brunt of their violence for the most part remains the same.
Yeah, they will not, nothing will change until the job changes, until policing is not what it has turned into. Until policing is not an all-purpose, basically just a way to make all social problems caused by widespread racism and income inequality go away. As long as that's the job of a police officer, that's what they're going to do. They're going to sweep the streets like Frank Castle, because what else is going to happen when an entire cast of people's job is to maintain sanctity of private property and racial hierarchy and everything else? In the face of a society that's falling apart at the seams. What are they going to do other than kill more and more people to maintain those borders?
Well, again, like it's certainly not fun to talk about, but I mean, we it has to be addressed. And I guess just to close out this part, like we're sharing the episode description, the bail fund that you can donate to for people in Minneapolis who have been arrested protesting this right now. We've supported a lot of different community bail funds in the past, but like I think this is probably the easiest, most effective way of showing support or solidarity for the people, fighting this in Minneapolis right now. Just any amount of money, I'm sure, will go a long way. So look for the link for the Minneapolis bail fund in the show description. Okay, moving on a slightly lighter note. Here's some good news. Donald Trump is going to get rid of mods once and for all. I'm talking, of course, about Trump's executive order targeting political bias at Twitter and Facebook. He announced this sort of like off the cuff last night that he was about to make a statement and issue an executive order, because he was mad that Twitter added an addendum to his tweet about how mail-in ballots are like all fraudulent. And this is the first time Twitter did that, because they've been receiving, like Mika Brzezinski has basically just been saying, please stop accusing my husband of murder, Trump. At Jack, please stop him. Delete his account. Take these tweets away. And they're adding this kind of like this fact-checking feature to Trump now, and he is very mad about it. And his response to this is, I'm reading from a news account here. It says, President Donald Trump is expected to order a review of a law that has protected Twitter, Facebook, and Google from being responsible for the material posted by their users, according to a draft executive order and a source familiar with the situation. News of the order comes after Trump threatened to shut down websites he accused of stifling conservative voices, following a dispute with Twitter after the company decided to tag Trump's tweets about unsubstantiated claims of fraud in mail-in voting, with a warning prompting readers to fact-check the posts. The order, a draft copy of which was seen by Reuters, could change before it's finalized. On Wednesday, officials said Trump will sign an executive order on social media companies Thursday. The executive order would require the Federal Communications Commissions to propose and clarify regulations under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, a federal law largely exempting online platforms from legal liability for the material their users post. Such changes could expose tech companies to more lawsuits. The order asks the FCC to examine whether actions related to the editing of content by social media companies should potentially lead to the platform forfeiting its protections under Section 230. Basically, Trump's going to make it illegal for you not to like your peepaws posts on Facebook.
All anyone ever wanted out of him. He will have finally made America great again.
And the weird thing is like Trump being on Twitter is just such like a singular interesting thing because it causes like so much weird consternation and agita, right? Because like obviously Twitter and all of Silicon Valley, certainly Facebook and Google, are like deeply evil, and we should honestly be very skeptical of the ideas of like how much of our expression and like the news like is monitored, controlled, or regulated by these companies. Because like, you know, since Trump has become in office and like everyone's panicked about Russian bots or whatever, there's been this big push to like have companies like Facebook or Twitter or Google act as sort of like our social conscience and sort of moderate the experience and such that like it sort of nudges people away from like stuff that will make them insane, and like just tell them like, hey, just so you know, like this is the bad food. These are the bad posts, but like, hey, look at these good posts, and like look at like all of the fact checkers that have signed off on it. And on one level, Trump's statements about mail-in voting is flatly untrue, and it's like pure propaganda. I mean, it's completely irresponsible and insane and wrong. But it is weird as well that like how much people are willing to let these private companies essentially become fact checkers for the content posted on it, which I think is also very frightening to think about when you know about like the people who work for these companies.
I mean, that's idiotic. They did this with Facebook. I mean, one of the most idiotic liberal things was the obsession with fucking Facebook and being convinced that if there's no Facebook, they win every election, which even if that's true, what does it say about you? But they got Facebook to acquiesce and be like, yeah, we'll fact check. Who did the Facebook get but people from Daily Caller, people from the Atlantic Council? It's almost as if fact checking is a very fucking nebulous term that isn't divorced from ideology. Lo and behold, a lot of things that weren't at the original purview of this got censored by it. It just strikes me as this idiotic ban. Like, looking at everything now, like looking at the condition of this country, and your main thing is like fact checking on social media. It just strikes me as this type of delusion that you wish that was the problem. That you wish that if we could fix that, everything would be fine.
Well, even more delusional than thinking that is one of the main problems we're facing is the fact that the solution you're seeking cannot work in the current moment. Fact checking appealed to an objective third-party judge can only work if there's an agreed upon understanding of reality, which, yeah, we used to have. At least we had one that was broadly enough agreed upon that you could have like real, like some sort of generalized trust in certain institutions to arbitrate disputes and to accept those outcomes and to accept what their claim on truth was. That's absolutely gone. There's none. So there's no way that you could fact check anything that will do the job that you want it to do, which is convince anyone other than people who are already convinced that it's not true. What you want is something to point to change people's minds, to say, no, I'm right, and here's the proof. And that cannot exist anymore. That cannot happen. You cannot argue somebody out of a position that they are politically invested in now, because no authority can be appealed to that anyone will agree to respect the views of.
And you know, again, like this is all a reaction to Trump becoming president, which is the thing that the media and like the establishment, broadly speaking, like just simply thought was impossible. And then when it happened, they had to like find an explanation for it. And I think for a lot of people, it was like, oh, the internet like lied to everyone because of Russia. Like Russia created memes that like suppressed the vote, which is, you know, fucking absurd. It's laughable. But like also it's a crisis of the fact that like never before as like the media as a part of our society or like an institution in it been less trusted and like had less power. And like overall, the information that you get like from like reading the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, if you base your worldview on that, I think you would have a better footing, a more informed footing than people who get into all of their news from YouTube. But the truth is, for the most part, especially if you're younger, but like this is becoming more broadly true of like almost everyone outside of, like I said, a very educated, like professional elite milieu. If you ask them like, where they get their news from or who they trust, it's all just weird YouTube people and like fucking like online accounts, like these like non-professional, diffuse sources. I'm saying like the majority of which are insane, untrustworthy, and bad. But like, given what we know about the role of the way newspapers, TV journalism, the news broadly, like how badly that like they've misinformed and like consciously lied to the public is like, I'm not saying it's overwhelmingly a good thing that they're like that any sort of like a professional standard for presenting facts about the world as they happen has never been weaker, and like what it's being replaced with is just like pure. I'm sorry, anything on YouTube is bad. Trump, can we get rid of YouTube entirely? Like that's forget Twitter and Facebook. I just think like it's the YouTube videos. I would very much like the government to get rid of all of them, except unless they're like movie trailers or, Felix, I guess in your case, video game frag highlights.
Or I mean, where else are we going to preserve Rich Piano or Dan Quinn or Damoni Sex's archives?
I think that should turn into a new oral tradition, honestly. We should carry those in our minds and hearts and speak them to people around campfires.
There are certain things in the original Damoni's video that I cannot say.
Yeah, but it's just this massive like sort of crisis of confidence in that like the media, even though like there are good professional people who work for it still and in the past, has like basically you have to kind of understand the role they play in our society, which is managing democracy and our politics within a very kind of narrow framework of what is acceptable to talk about. And it's not even like, we've talked about this so many times before, like the most effective form of propaganda is just not talking about certain things. Like that's all you really have to do.
Yes, yeah.
And the fact that like the void is being filled or people are finding their own sources, like everything now, like whether it's entertainment or news or anything, like everything has become like just so individualized to these like micro audiences and like micro bubbles of reality that people can craft for themselves and live in constantly. And the panic over like information or propaganda metastasizing on social media is I understand it, but I think it's foolish. And what's worse is I think a lot of the remedies that these people are proposing for it are like they're almost basically just calling for the FBI to take over control of Twitter and like ban accounts for being rude or like. I mean, like there's so many people on Twitter now who thinks that every single person they interact with is like either in Russia, like sitting at a desk in like a military base typing posts out, or like a computer algorithm designed to like wind them up and spread disinformation.
Well, the thing is, though, this is a new type of thing. Like social media companies, these platforms, that's never really existed before. And I don't think that we have really gotten our minds around what their implications are. Because obviously it's easy to point to conservatives who say, I want small government, but I also want the FBI to go to my grandkids' house and put a gun to their head and make them click like on my fucking meme that I put on Facebook. Obviously that's absurd, but it's because the confusion is understandable to the extent that we have these private companies that have the role of public utilities.
That's it.
We've not resolved that at all.
And the thing is, like the chuds, like when they're confronted, would be like, oh, like you got a problem with Twitter banning you, or like you violated their TOS, like it's a private company, blah blah blah, and like to a certain extent that's true, but when you like, especially Facebook and Google, like to the extent to which that they have become monopolies on like news, information, communication in the public. And that, like, as a private corporation, they're technically within their rights to ban anything. And we know for sure, like, the way they put their thumb on the scale for, like, the news that you do see and that you don't see, and the way they direct that for their own benefit is kind of terrifying. And I'm sorry, like, the fact that they're private corporations is sort of a fig leaf when you think about the level of control over, like, what are like theoretically, formally, like my free speech isn't violated if Facebook kicks me off the platform, and like I don't think that's like a huge injustice, but like how much can you like exist and interact as a person or functionally exercise freedom of expression and speech when the medium for doing that for the most part now is become a monopoly controlled by a private corporation. So, my answer to this is that like Facebook, Google, all of Silicon Valley should be nationalized by the government, essentially,
and then shut down.
It's just like just turn the key, like put the two keys in the slot, turn at the same time, shut off the internet.
No more internet.
Hopefully, President Trump, if you're listening, just end Twitter.
Free us from
all.
this hell.
Free us from this hell that we've created for ourselves.
I mean, I like all this stuff about Twitter being like the hell set or whatever. It's like the only thing that's like really bad in and of itself with Twitter is the same problem that's been going on with the entire internet, which is that you have immediate quantifiable success for your posts. Putting numbers under posts was the worst thing that they ever did to the fucking internet, and that's not just Twitter. But after
that's always never going to go away because it's addictive. They're never
right. It's never going to go away because it makes people use it more.
Yeah.
But as always, the problem is the users.
Yeah.
If you're seeing bad posts, it's because you have bad users. It's because you yourself are probably a bad poster.
Yeah, you have bad
and you're
friends.
surrounded by other fucking bad posters, and none of you can craft an original thought. That's it.
No, I agree with you. I'm obviously halfway kidding about how I want Trump to shut down Twitter permanently.
Well,
But
Trump should make if Trump really wanted to, he should turn Twitter into a forum that everyone has to use. And there could be like a billion different subforums. Like there could be the gun subforum. There could be like the food review subforum. There could be everything. But there'd be no more numbers. Everyone would just have a join date and a post count. Those would be the only two numbers. And then, off to the races. No more character limits.
So just Reddit, basically.
No, it would be like an old, like BB board standard, not like what Reddit looks like, which I don't know what the fuck that is. Return to tradition is what I want.
Reddit has numbers. You have the upvotes.
Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to interject one thing because the Times just released a slightly longer article about this. The Section 230 thing that he wants to strike down. Something funny about this is that he basically wants to change the law to allow it to be easier to sue the platforms because of their posts, like reduce liability protections for the platforms, which would hilariously make posts like his more of a liability for them because they could be sued for spreading disinformation, and make them stricter about regulating what people post on it, thus reducing the precious free speech more.
From what I'm seeing, what it's really going to end up to is there's just going to be a freaking crank line for you to call the Justice Department to complain to someone else about no one liking your posts.
Yeah, that would be
It's just another person
Actually, you know
to
what?
complain about people not liking your posts.
That is my
This is a
dream
concept
job.
we've-
Just
yeah.
working the help phone at DOJ, being like, and then what happened after you memed on your soy nephew?
No, actually,
my dream.
You know what? This is actually a good idea. It's a concept we've talked about on the show before. The concept of the busy box. Where,
Yes.
yeah, just create a hotline that all the cranks can just call and like just pour all of their energy and attention into, but essentially it doesn't go anywhere or do anything. It's just recorded and then thrown in the trash immediately.
But
as long as you create this impression that like their complaints are being heard and addressed, but is essentially just a honeypot for antisocial maladroits of every kind.
That should be for everyone. Like there should be a DOJ thing, and it's marketed to different types of people. Like if you're conservative, it's like, is your soy nephew getting you shadow banned? And it's like you call that number. Or if you're like an annoying lib, it's like, are people sea-lining your posts? Call the FBI. And it just gets everyone. And I would go for like, do you know that thing, the Tilt?
What is that?
There's this thing called the Tilt, which is like some fucking weird bullshit app that takes over your phone, but you vote on idiotic subjects. It's like, who's the hotter babe, Kate Upton or Megan Fox?
Kate Upton, obviously. Where is this fucking website? I need to
Megan
fucking
Fox
vote right now.
Megan Fox.
Yeah.
No.
What the
Disagree.
fuck?
Disagree. Wrong.
But it's like, and you can vote, and you can like, you just vote on a hot button social issue by like tweeting a hashtag. And I think like we should just tell like probably like most Americans, if that's how you vote now. There should be like these are really going to be public utilities, most social media should just be like a way to occupy the most annoying Americans.
Yes, absolutely.
Overall, though, to echo Felix, hell site, no, heaven site.
No, there's
It's
still,
you know what I
yeah.
see good posts because
I see good posts all the time.
I see
You
good
should
posts.
follow
'Cause
better
I
people.
follow good people. Like I go to
Yeah.
have fun, hang out with my homies, talk shit, post, look at some animals, have fun.
Yeah, we're posting gators, monkeys. Yeah, I mean, if you like are having a bad time on the health site, it's because you post like 50 tweet deckers and people who post stuff like energy is a vibe and it gets 300 million retweets, and you're like, oh, the website's bad. It's like, no, you just have a terrible taste.
There you go. Be interesting to see what President Trump does with some more of these executive orders to protect his posts.
Protect at all time, at all costs, the posts.
Do not let down our beautiful voters. Uphold presidential tweet thought. That is what the thought I will leave you with for today. Once again, please check out in the show description if you're interested in seeing that lunatic Dave Grossman teach cops how to more cold-bloodedly shoot people who are unarmed and in their thrall. If you feel like watching that, the link will be in the show description. But more importantly, check out the Minneapolis, Minnesota Bail Fund and kick in whatever you can, because I think that will go the longest way towards helping people out and showing a sense of solidarity with the people standing up to the nightmarish fucking conditions of law enforcement and American society. So I'll leave you with that. That's your show. We will be back with you soon, as always, and forever. Take it easy, guys. Bye.
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 Bye.